holding money is the literal opposite of investing money. You're telling every entrepreneur who's asking you for money that he's not good enough, that his projects are not important enough, that not investing is better than investing. And this just means we will reduce our resource consumption substantially. With every sat that you hold, you reduce the amount of resources allocated today, so that we have more resources available in the future.
Hello and welcome to the Freedom Footprint Show. I'm your host, Luke the Pseudo-Finn, and I'm here as usual with Knut Svanholm. Good evening, Knut.
Good evening, Luke. Nice to be here again. We're recording a bunch of these, and I'm enjoying every second of it.
Same here, same here. We've got a lot of great people lined up, including today's guest, free software entrepreneur Max Hillebrand. You might know him from Wasabi Wallet. He's also involved in a whole bunch of other things. Super smart guy too. He's been on loads of pods. We're thrilled to have him on this one. So just quickly before we bring him on, just a reminder, the best way to support the show, if you'd like to do that, is to use a value for value podcasting app such as Fountain or Breeze. And you can send us a boost or stream us some sats there. We always appreciate that. And if you share our podcast or videos, we also appreciate that too. You can subscribe to the Consensus Network YouTube channel as well. And Consensus is really the platform that we're trying to build here. The Freedom Footprint Show is the first big content push that Consensus is bringing out, and they do lots of other stuff, translations of Bitcoin books into tons of different languages and a whole bunch of other things. So check them out at consensus.network. And I think,
you can buy my stupid shit at knutsvanholm.com, including this beautiful embroidered T-shirt. So
I nearly wore the same one tonight. Actually, that would have been good if we were matching.
Yeah, you'll.
But okay, let's bring Max on.
Yeah, one of my favorite people in the whole world, Max Hillebrand. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much, guys, for the invite. I'm really looking forward to this one. Been a fan of the Consensus Network since, day zero, and very glad to be joining this production of it as well.
Good to hear. And we've been talking a lot lately in real life. I mean, we first we met on Madeira, and then we met in Riga. I'm doxing you now, Max. I realize that here in hindsight, but this is the past, so it's okay. So we met in Riga, and we met in Amsterdam, and we met in Prague, and we had some wonderful conversations. I know I really love deep diving into these, into praxeology and all sorts of other philosophical stuff with you and the others. So I thought we'd start from somewhere where we left off, or maybe clue some people in first, because we took the conversation quite far. So
the rabbit holes get really long, especially when we're on long, endless walks throughout the cities at late night. You know,
exactly. So you recommended some books to me, and two of the best books I've read lately or ever. One was The Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard, which you have a wonderful little walkthrough with Robert Breedlove about on his What is Money show. And that book was really eye-opening. But then you recommended one with a boring-ass title called Economic Science and the Austrian Method, I believe.
Yes.
by Hans Hermann Hoppe, and that one was really good. So I recommend that to everyone. That's the one where he introduces the argument axiom and a lot of other good stuff. So I woke up early this morning and started writing stuff about praxeology, being all it felt like a productive morning for once. So I started writing a piece based on some other stuff, and realized quickly that as I know from other subjects, the best way to absolutely learn something properly yourself is to teach it to others. So I'm trying to do that, and so let's have a conversation about praxeology, shall we?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good that you're getting into writing about praxeology, because well, I put it onto my to-do list like years ago, but man, it's a tough thing, man. I haven't written a page for like half a year or something. So good that you're doing it while I'm being lazy.
Well, we'll see what happens with that writing. So sometimes I just discard stuff and start on something else instead.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's kind of intimidating, since the texts that have already been written about it are so brilliant. So it's hard to contribute something new. But maybe we could, explain it in layman's terms somehow too, if you even can do that. But the basic premises of praxeology are quite easy. The way I see it, especially after the Hopper book, is that there are two main branches of science, and one is a posteriori science, which is most sciences are a posteriori, which means that they are based on empirical evidence and something from experience. But praxeology is more like mathematics in the sense that it's an a priori science, which means that you, instead of trying to prove things by showing examples of why it works, you use deductive reasoning alone, and you start from a couple of self-evident axioms, such as the first axiom of praxeology, which is human action is purposeful behavior. So when a human being does something on purpose, that's an action, and that's the definition of the word action in the praxeological sense. And then you start from a bunch of other, or a couple of other axioms that are introduced later. And from these axioms alone, or axioms are sort of facts that you have to take for granted in order to do the rest of the reasoning. And from them, you can come to conclusions that are robust and can't really be argued against, since you can't argue against the basic truths. One of them is that if I try to just take apart the first axiom, that human action is purposeful behavior, I have to argue with you that it's not, and thereby I'm doing something on purpose. It's a purposeful action. So by trying to argue against it, I prove the axiom to be true. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like the another great book that goes into this is the biography by Ludwig von Mises called "The Last Night of Liberalism" by Jörg Guido Hülsmann, and there you really he lays out the really hefty fighting amongst philosophers of like the early 20th century about how to think about different areas of life. And of course, with the scientific revolution going on, which was the a posteriori way of thinking, physics, for example, right? We pick up a ball and we let it go, and it just falls down, not just once, but every time. And then we can start deducing some realizations about how this world operates based on the perceived happenings of history. And I mean, that physics and these other objective scientists were of course, mind-blowing for us and extremely, extremely helpful. I mean, just look where the scientific revolution got us on so many aspects. It's with everything, engineering, medicine, all of these things, astrology and such. So
astrology.
so early philosophers about economics were then trying to apply the same methodology for economics, right? But that led to, many fallacies, many bad realizations that if you look at them closely, they don't really make sense. Like one of those key things was, for example, the intrinsic value of goods. And so the observation was like, because someone traded, let's say, 2 apples for a steak, that means that these two like the two apples and the steak are of equal value because they were exchanged, right? But and that that sounds reasonable at first, but then if you look closer, like if they were truly of equal value, then why would they be exchanged? You know, that doesn't really make sense, because why would you do something if what you get is as equal as what you had before?
Yeah.
And there were numerous of these small fallacies. So, for example, you know, why is water something that humans need to survive? Why is that so super cheap? But diamonds, something that is a luxury good, so to say, why is that so super expensive? You know, if we really need water, that should be much more expensive than these diamonds that nobody has a real use for other than looking at. So these were a lot of the economic puzzles that were bothering people, and they couldn't really find explanations. And then this genius from Vienna called Karl Menger came up with a couple realizations like subjective marginal value judgments, meaning that value is not intrinsic in the goods and resources, but rather value is within the eye of the beholder, meaning that, well, we can't really say how valuable a certain thing is. You can't quantify it into a certain number, and then you can't add it up. You know, an apple doesn't have 5 utils, and a steak doesn't have 10 utils. So 2 apples, 5 plus 5 equals a steak. That's not how it works. On the contrary, it's all about let's say opportunity cost and about subjective marginal preferences, right? So, for example, that the first unit of an apple, like let's say you're completely starving, right? You haven't eaten for weeks, and all of a sudden someone gives you an apple. Well, this one apple saves your life, because otherwise you would be starving. So that first apple is extremely valuable to you. It's literally a matter of life and death. What about the second apple? Right? Now you've already satiated some of your existential hunger. Of course, you could still eat, you know, but it's that second apple is marginally less valuable than the first. And the third apple is still nice to have, but you know, you're getting pretty full, so it decreases in value even further. And let's say after the 5th or 6th apple, eventually you're so full of it that you would puke if you would eat another one. That means that we have a cardinal valuation, meaning we can say that some things are more valuable than others, but we cannot say by how much these are more valuable, right? So that's it's not cardinal. It is ordinal. So cardinal would mean 5. The apple has 5 utils, and the second apple has 5 utils. So together they have 10 utils, and that's cardinal. Versus ordinal means about ordering, right? So you can say, okay, I prefer a steak over an apple, right? Or I value the second apple less than the first apple, but I don't know by how much I value it more or less. These were some of the realizations by Karl Menger that really kickstarted a massive evolution in economic thought.
Yeah, and that ordinal thing it can also be that you prefer 3 apples to 5 apples because you don't have enough storage for more than 3. So it's even more complicated than that, and it goes back to the basic insight that value is entirely subjective. It is something that starts and ends in our heads,
or hearts.
Or hearts, or whatever our hearts desire. I believe that what happens in our hearts happens in our heads too, but that's a different discussion. What are some of the other? Speaking about Menger, wasn't there? Didn't he? Disclude, if that's even a word, some things from this subjective theory of value. I think there was something about cosmetics or something, because this is a historical, even the great thinkers make mistakes about certain things, and Menger wasn't a perfect person, and like none of us are, but so we have this body of work of the praxeological thinkers of the 20th century, but none of them were absolutely perfect. So it's still a branch of science that is very much yet to be explored, and it's getting a bit of a renaissance now that Bitcoin has been introduced to the scene, because people like us tend to nerd out on these things, and we find them immensely valuable to think about. Yeah. Because it's all of a sudden there's a social science that makes sense. Because if there's something I remember from school, it's hating the social sciences because of, always thinking that, but hang on, this isn't true, this is an opinion. And
exactly.
This is just whatever you're telling me here about borders or taxes or institutions, that they're just products of the human imagination. They're not as, real as mathematics. And I always found that so annoying, that you were given this beautiful knowledge in form of mathematics and physics and so on, which uses a lot of deductive reasoning too. It's not only observation, but you use mathematics to make things easier. But there was nothing similar in the realm of social sciences. So if you, like me, are looking for something to explain human beings, really, praxeology is the rabbit hole to fall down, and there's so much to find there. What are the other starting axioms? One is about property. How is property defined by praxeology?
Oh, that's a tough one. So property isn't.
It's a relationship, right? Between
exactly right. It's the relationship among humans and their resources, so to say. And the body, in that sense, is a resource of the individual. And property or property rights are a conclusion of reality, in the sense that humans have purposeful behavior. They act. And that behavior is associated with allocation of scarce resources. And so we have certain desires, or in other words, we have problems, and we want to solve those problems. We want to satisfy our desires. And in order to do so, we need to apply and utilize resources. However, these resources are such that they can only be applied for one given task at any given time. If I have a steak in front of me, like either I eat the steak or Knut eats the steak. We're both hungry, right? But there's only only one of us can utilize the scarce resource. So there's a potential of conflict over who can allocate these resources to alleviate his problems. And
yeah, alleviate problems. That's how Mises put it too. We all do stuff for one single basic reason, and that is to remove a felt uneasiness. So that's where all action stems from.
Yeah, exactly, right? We have problems, we want to solve them because, well, they are problems and they bother us. And we expect that by a certain mode of acting, these problems will be gone in the future, right? So, you're hungry, that doesn't feel good. And we make the entrepreneurial judgment that if I were to cook a steak and to eat it, that future me would have less problems, or at least different problems than I have right now, meaning I'm no longer hungry if I actually do that. So that's and of course, right, that doesn't even, that's not it's not a certainty that if I eat the steak, I'm going to be hungry or I'm going to be satiated. It might be that, the steak is rotten, actually, and I only find that out after I take the first bite. And that would be entrepreneurial error. I tried to apply my resources to solve a problem, but in the end, I didn't succeed. The problem is still there. Maybe it got worse. And now the resources are consumed, or at least applied into these production stages.
Yeah, and understanding this is very crucial to understanding what's wrong with empirical science, because all of empirical science might be wrong in the sense that, the experiments may be carried out meticulously and so on and so forth, but they may still come to draw the wrong conclusions. And that has happened over and over again in all sorts of sciences. Newton is a great example, because his theories turned out to be wrong, but we didn't figure that out until centuries later.
Yeah.
when Einstein came up with his theories, and after that, those were debunked as well, at least to a certain extent. So but it's hard to argue with a priori science just because of the fact that it's a priori, that it stems from reasoning alone, and it's devoid of human opinion to as large of an extent as you can remove opinion from science.
Yeah, I mean, these a priori sciences can be well, wrong in quotes if your assumptions are wrong, if your axioms are wrong, or if you have a logical deductive mistake. Right? When you misuse logic, and that happened frequently, like Menger, Mises, Rothbard, all of these made logical errors in some of their analysis. That doesn't mean that praxeology is wrong. It just means that you were not consistent in applying reason on top of the axioms in these analyses. But
or that the axioms themselves were wrong somehow.
Yeah, so you have to really, really be careful to check your axioms, right? But action is purposeful behavior, like, that's a pretty solid axiom. I mean, try to take it apart, but as Hoppe points out in economic science and the Austrian method, it is, well, the arguments for why these axioms are good are very, very strong, and as far as I know, nobody has laid out a way to refute them. So far we're good. Doesn't mean that in the future we find out that no, actually, action is not really purposeful behavior. But that's, well, I would say that's not likely. But if that were to happen, then yes, all of the economic or praxeological reasoning on top of that would be flawed as well.
Oh yeah, epistemology comes to mind. Like, that's like the underlying science between of how we do science, right? So and there has been people that have critiqued the methods of the Austrians. Some of those are just people from other regular a posteriori branches of science that call it pseudoscientific just because of the fact that it doesn't use empirical evidence, so it can't prove anything. But the praxeological counter argument is that just what I said a couple of minutes ago, that it is the other way around. If you can't reason yourself to a position, that's when you can't take it for granted, because observation can always be wrong, because it requires an observer of a certain event. And as we know from quantum mechanics, an observer to some extent interferes with the reality it is observing. So there's that. I mean,
yeah, and the fact that the situation changes with every action, and if you would take a historical view. The question of, does minimum wages lead to unemployment? You could look at a society where minimum wage laws have been enacted and then see, okay, that unemployment numbers go up or down, right? But the big, or so let's assume maybe even here unemployment went down, right? So more people got a job because of, or as there was minimum wages enacted. Well, can we reproduce this in the future? No. Because the entire situation changes, right? The next society that we would look at has different jobs, different people, different problems, and so we cannot
different money,
different monies, exactly. Like, everything is different, and so we cannot have a clear scientific experiment where we can reproduce in the same, well, clean environment, so to say, because the environment always changes and the humans always change. You're not the same person that you were before you ate the steak. You're fundamentally different because you're no longer hungry.
Yeah, and that's why all the other economic sciences, or so-called economic sciences, are wrong, because the market is always dynamic. One of my favorite examples that I use, that people misinterpret so often, is prices and what prices are. because prices are nothing but historical data points. They show you what someone was willing to give up in a certain currency for a certain good at a certain point in time, and namely the last time the item was bought. So even like a bottle of milk in the supermarket, the price tag on the bottle is not what the bottle is worth, because you decide if you want to buy it or not. And if everyone decides that the price is too high, the milk the supermarket won't make any money off of milk, so they will have to adjust the price to whatever to the wants and the needs of the customers. Mm-hmm. And this is why,
in fact, the price displayed for the milk, if people buy the milk, that's actually a proof that the milk is more valuable than the amount of money that was displayed in the price, because otherwise people wouldn't have bought it. They would have kept the money, as that amount of money is more valuable to them than the liter of milk.
Exactly. So that tells the merchant that he can raise the price of the milk if he still manages to sell all the milk and doesn't have to throw any out, and they can make a calculation. And this is why prices are such a vital part of a functioning society and a functioning market, because it tells people what other people want and need and have the resources to acquire. So it tells you a lot about society on the whole, and what we're able and capable of acquiring with what amount of effort on our part. And so that's another one of these subsets of praxeology. It explains very well why price signals are so important. We're skipping a whole bunch of steps in praxeology here.
That's not proper reasoning right there.
No, but this is why any type of interventionism in a market where it screws with the price signals, and thereby it makes it harder for people to acquire the skills in order to provide other human beings with what they actually want from you. So over time, in a society with high taxes and or even with small taxes and a little inflation, that fucks with the pricing signals as well, and makes people acquire skills that they don't really need, except for that reality which they happen to find themselves in at that point in time. But in the long run, it makes people less productive.
Yeah, I know. And as we said earlier, values are ordinal. And we don't know about how much you value something. We just know that you value something more than the other alternative. However, prices are very much a cardinal, right? So there is a clear number, and 5 Bitcoin is half as much as 10 Bitcoin. And that is a incredible feat of a monetary system and a price system, that we've transformed something that is ordinal into something that is cardinal. And all of a sudden, a calculation becomes possible, right? About many things, including about resource allocation, about profit, and such. That's like money is so utterly important just for that fact alone.
Yeah, and it works as long as the money itself doesn't lose its value over time. So you need the money to be somewhat scarce, and some would say it needs to be fixed.
Well, I mean, so like the praxeological definition of scarcity it has nothing to do with abundance. Scarcity is a binary phenomenon. So either something is scarce or something is not scarce. And scarce in the sense of there's a potential conflict. There's an exclusivity over who can apply these resources, right? Either Knut spends the 10 Bitcoin or I spend the 10 Bitcoin. So that is scarcity. Then abundance is a secondary factor.
Yes. So scarcity refers to what's actually available on the market, and not what's has nothing to do with the total supply of something.
Well, so I mean,
it goes deeper than that. Maybe you have a better explanation.
Yeah. So there's lots of nuance here, and even there's disagreements about these types of definitions of the words amongst Austrians, right? But so some say that something is scarce if there is more demand than supply, right? Because then there is actually a conflict. Like for example, air. The actual molecules, like either I breathe them in or Knut breathes them in. So there's definitely an exclusivity. However, they are in a state of superabundance. There is so much air around us that we don't need to worry about who gets to breathe the air, because there's plenty enough for everyone. Right?
They're also fungible.
Yes. So that just means there's a superabundance of air, and therefore there's no conflict over who gets to breathe in the air. And because there is no conflict, we don't need any system of property rights to allocate who can breathe this air. But let's go all of a sudden underwater. We're now scuba divers, and we have a bottle of compressed air with us, or oxygen, and all the other molecules inside. Knut and I are swimming underwater, just one bottle. All of a sudden, there's a very limited amount of air available, and there's only one mouthpiece to take the air out. So now there is a conflict over who can use this very exclusive, scarce, and limited amount of air available. And now we need property rights as a solution to the conflict of who can allocate these resources to alleviate his problems.
Yeah, funny you brought up that example, because I used a similar example in my first book, the one I brought to Riga 3 years ago, which is like your next breath can be immensely valuable to you if you're a free diver trapped under ice, but worth nothing if you're a person with a death wish and clean forest air. So another example would be water, which is made artificially scarce to some extent, and in some places on some corners of the world it is scarce. And in some places it's so abundant that you can't charge people anything for it, really. Yeah.
And technology is a factor to make goods more abundant. Right?
Yeah.
If you live in a swampy area, for example, with a bunch of dead animals lying around in the water, all of a sudden there's lots of toxins and whatnot in the water. So it's not suitable for human consumption. It does not alleviate your problem of thirst. In fact, it kills you. Clean water is not abundant. There's a lot of conflict over who can drink it, and so we do need the property rights. However, if humans develop a way to filter out the toxins from the swamp in order to create a bunch of clean water, so much that it becomes super abundant, then everyone just drinks the water because it's everywhere. Here, that's yet another reason why it is important to have property rights and entrepreneurial activity being encouraged, because entrepreneurs come up with ways to solve your problems easier, cheaper, and at larger scale. Right? There's plenty of way to, for example, catch the water molecules inside the atmosphere, even when you're in the Sahara. In the morning, there's a bunch of condensated water available, and you could, in theory, build devices that catch this. And all of a sudden, there's a plethora of liquid, human drinkable, and clean water available in the Sahara, making it a very abundant resource all of a sudden. The reason why it's not abundant yet is because humans have not deployed the capital to transform the atmosphere into liquid water.
Yeah, the way I describe technology and tools in general in the latest book is that all tools and technologies have the same basic function, or basic purpose, and that is to save someone time somewhere. So everything we invent affects the temporal dimension. It affects our because everything else that we assign value to is connected to time in that sense. The only truly scarce resource for each human being, regardless of status or anything else, or how much money you have in the bank, is human time, because it is limited for each and every one of us. So everything else we do is connected to that. If we're mindful of our time, we can achieve more, and we can live richer lives. So what are your thoughts on time and time saving in that sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting way of thought, but I'm still not sure if time itself is actually scarce. Time, to some extent, in a praxeological view, is the temporal points before and after the action. Right? So you're hungry, you eat, you're no longer hungry. That process of you eating, that process of you acting, is time in and of itself. And well, maybe what's more scarce is your attention. Maybe where do you apply your actions? Meaning, where do you apply your work across time? Because that is very much exclusive. You know, either you eat or you're asleep. You can't do both at the same time. And that exclusivity means it has to be allocated really wisely. Because if you eat all the time, you're never going to sleep. Yeah, like time is not an actual resource in and of itself. It's more of a consequence of resource allocation, something like that.
Oh, this is very interesting, because either it's the only resource or it's not a resource at all. Mm-hmm. And I think we can, come up with arguments for both sides of that. This inevitably leads us to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin being as scarce as human time, or scarce is as finite is the word I should use, right? I shouldn't use the word scarce. I should use the word finite. So Bitcoins have a limited supply, because we agree that it does, basically, and therefore I view them as a perfect representation of this finite amount of days or weeks or hours or seconds you have on this earth, and therefore I think they can function as a good form of money. I'm struggling to even view them as money, since they're basically just an agreement on a fixed set of rules that enables mathematical formula to ensure that something in the mathematical realm cannot be copied, and therefore can stay finite for also foreseeable future. This is hard to explain. if you want
really more to explain, she had it absolutely right on that point.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that and Bitcoin's connection to time? Yeah, if you want more of my thoughts, read my books.
So, Bitcoin is a lot of things, and one thing that Bitcoin is software. Arguably a set of rules, a set of instructions for the computer to compute things. And arguably those are math formulas, right? So the code itself is non-scarce. I can download the code and read it and run it on my computer. Knut can do the same, right? The actual code is not scarce. There's no conflict over who can run the Bitcoin source code. It's just speech. So that is fundamentally non-scarce. However, we need a computer to compute the source code, and that is physical material. That is silicon, that is plastic, that is metals, all the things inside a computer. Those are very scarce.
Let me interrupt you there and say that you don't really need one. It just makes the whole process a lot easier. Doing it by pen and paper is hard and time consuming
Exactly, right? So we apply resources into production stages to produce tools that we can use to run these computations at a breakneck speed, way faster than it would ever be possible for humans, right? And that's the other thing with capital goods and with production tools. They help you to alleviate problems that without them would be not just time intensive, but utterly impossible to do. It's a nice joke that you could compute the Bitcoin software by hand, but in actual reality, it is literally impossible. Right? It just would not work. Full stop.
I saw a video once of a guy trying to do it. So he was he calculated a hash. Of course, he didn't get any zeros in the beginning, so he had to start over again.
exactly, right? He has to calculate
yeah.
he calculated one hash, and it took him like 2 days or something.
Yes.
Right? So like like your computer does way more than just calculating one hash in order to run the Bitcoin source code, right? Like just alone to write down the source code by yourself would be so utterly insanely complex, let alone to execute it, right? To put input into that huge formula and to calculate the output. Like it's literally impossible. Like, arguably, yes, you could do it in 1 billion years or something, but for all intents and purposes, it's just impossible, right? So
it ties into time, because you would need an infinite amount of time, or near infinite is an oxymoronic too, but you would need way more time than a human lifetime to do it. And by that time,
arguably, like, this is so complex that your own compute power is not enough to deal with it. Like, or at the very least, you would need a pen and paper, right? So, which arguably is a tool that you're using. It's not quite a computer, but it's something that aids you in computation. Right? Yeah. So there's, are you going to keep like 700 gigabytes of blockchain data in memory? Like, yeah, sure, right?
Jokes aside, but here, going to the pen and paper, no single human being on Earth can construct a pen and a piece of paper on their own. Mm-hmm. So the pen and the paper are also products of a somewhat functioning free market, and a global one at that, because the mineral, like the graphite needed and the lead needed for the pen, probably comes from another continent than the wood in the pen, and the paint coating and the varnish.
All of a sudden, it's not just about cutting down a tree to get a wood. All of a sudden, you need to build a ship to cross a fucking ocean. So you need to develop steel, and you need to get the theory of buoyancy, and big fucking ship.
And I crossed oceans with fucking ships, and it's fucking tedious, I can tell you. Yes.
And navigating a ship. Yeah, good luck coming up with that by yourself. Now you need to watch the stars for proper navigation, or you're gonna need satellites for GPS tracking. So good luck building a fucking rocket by yourself.
Here we are. Yeah.
But nevertheless, right? So the Bitcoin source code is non-scarce. The computers that run the computation are fundamentally scarce. The ASIC machines that are specialized for hashing SHA-256 over Bitcoin block headers, they are very much scarce as well. And ultimately, the humans that make decisions based on the result of the computation of the Bitcoin software are also scarce, or at least their body is. So there's both scarcity and non-scarcity in Bitcoin, and ultimately, Bitcoin is a specific set of rules that helps humans make decisions. Right? Bitcoin doesn't exist in a vacuum. Bitcoin is a tool used by individuals in order, and also the security of Bitcoin is ultimately based on the security of humans. Right? If Eric Voskio put this so beautifully with the axiom of resistance, Bitcoin can only save you if you resist coercion. Because if someone puts a gun to your head and tells you, hey, give me your Bitcoin private keys, Bitcoin cannot protect you. Bitcoin can only protect you if you want to be protected, and if you're willing to put your life on the line to be protected.
Oh, but there's another thing there. The guy with the gun cannot possibly, if you give him some of your Bitcoin and you tell him that that's all my Bitcoin, this private key here that unlocks these Bitcoins here, he has no way of knowing if there are more Bitcoins in your possession or not.
Well, yes and no. If you're smart about how to use Bitcoin, yes. If you're stupid, no. Right? Let's
but how can he know if we are smart or stupid, and not just playing stupid?
Well, I mean, he can look on the blockchain and see about which transactions funded the address of the private key that you just gave him. And he can look at where were these coins spent in the future. And you can deduce with quite a lot of, depending on the usage of Bitcoin, you can deduce certainly the transfer of ownership into different coins, right? There's, for example, change detection heuristics, so that you all of a sudden know, okay, it's not just this address that you control. You made a payment here, and on this other address, you received change.
Now you're just shilling wasabi, aren't you?
No, you know, that's again, right? Bitcoin is a genius tool, but you have to use it properly, right?
Yeah.
If you reuse addresses all the
But-
time, people definitely know how much Bitcoin you have. The genius thing is Bitcoin enables you to be anonymous. So you can be a completely anonymous miner. You don't need to sign up. You don't need to have reputation. You don't need to have identity in order to start hashing and in order to find a valid proof of work. Right. So definitely you could have been running, the Bitcoin mining software on your computer in order to get a random block. And yeah, there's no way to actually link this to your identity, assuming you did a bunch of other things in your network stack correctly. Same with addresses. You can generate a new key. It is indistinguishably random. It could have been generated by anyone. And if you receive coins to there is no direct indication that this address belongs to you. But of course, if someone knows, for example, your extended public key, where he can derive all of the addresses that you have derived by yourself as well, then all of a sudden he knows that, yeah, these 100 addresses on the chain are controlled by one private key ultimately.
Yes, but apart from that specific, XPub, you could have bought Bitcoin from someone off the street or wherever, from a friend that this potential attacker does not know about, and gave him whatever in return, and those Bitcoin could be stored by some other means than that part of the stack which you were forced to give away. And you can have infinite amounts of these different. I mean, you can take on different personas, even if that's what you will call it. So I'm pointing out that for the attacker, it's impossible to know to 100% that he got all of your Bitcoins, which is not true if you store gold bars in a house, because you can actually figure out how much gold there is in the house and take all of it. Of course, I can store gold somewhere else, but Bitcoins are
exactly.
But
there's a huge planet. You might as well have dug some hole in the ground, and put the doghouse on top of it. That's an equally valid argument, right? So
but here we go
into how you use the tools.
Yeah, yes, of course. But here we go into semantics again, and something you pointed out to me once: the difference between ownership and possession. Because ownership is contractual, and possession is who actually controls the thing. And in Bitcoin, that is a special case, because in Bitcoin there's no difference between knowing about the private key and owning the Bitcoins. That's the same thing. So you've moved possession into the intellectual realm instead of the physical realm. And I personally think that changes everything, because it at least reduces the incentives for a potential attacker to attack you, since you cannot know if you got away with all of it, or if you got it makes more sense to provide something of value to the potentially rich Bitcoiner and get something of value back, which is what we're doing now, by the way. So that makes more sense than attacking. So you move the shelling point of violence out to a new realm, and this is only one aspect of how Bitcoin disincentivizes violence. There are other aspects of this, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's one of Hans Hopper's amazing contributions in economic science, right? That he shows that there is a praxeological ethics where we can prove that voluntary action is a net benefit for the human actor, and therefore it is in your selfish economic best interest to not steal. Because there are consequences to that are very far-reaching, far more than just the initial perceived one. And Bitcoin kind of builds on top of that. That yes, it increases the cost of attack across numerous measures, obviously, right? And it decreases the cost of defense. Using Bitcoin is rather cheap. Yes, having a computer is actually quite an expensive miracle. and having the internet infrastructure and such. But nowadays, thanks to our advanced capital accumulation and our advanced production stages, using Bitcoin has become incredibly cheap, all things considered. Versus attacking it and attacking the individuals using Bitcoin has become quite expensive. Not just among other things, because using Bitcoin can be anonymous if done correctly. So yes, that makes collaboration and voluntary exchange even more profitable compared to the alternative of coercion and violence. So of course that doesn't mean that that economic or that political actors, thieves, they don't have to act in their own self-interest. They can speculate that the perceived short-term gains outweigh the long-term consequences, and still try to harass you and try to get the magic number of your private key ultimately.
Yeah, this ties into time preference, of course. That I would consider that type of calculation to be a high time preference thing. That to briefly explain the concept of time preference, a high time preference is when the highest form of time preference you can adopt is when you're robbed of everything you own, because then you automatically adopt a high time preference because you need to find food and shelter in order to survive. So you will prioritize actions that are temporally closer to where you are in time than if you have a low time preference, which is when you built up capital and reputation and stuff over time so that you can be more sure of your survival in the future, so to speak, and therefore you can afford to make more long-term decisions and build things that will last longer. Is that an accurate description, you think?
Yes, basically. Another word for time preference is delayed gratification. So how long can you postpone the alleviation of your problems into the uncertain future? And the future is definitely uncertain because, well, a piano might fall on top of your head and all of a sudden you're dead. And then you delayed the gratification into infinity. You know, you didn't eat the steak right now. You wanted to wait another hour, but then you're dead. So you can never get to eat the steak. And so because humans act and because humans are mortal, time preference can never be infinite or zero, right? You can't delay your gratification until infinity because eventually you die. So time preference, therefore, is always positive. You always prefer, and that's another assumption, by the way, you always prefer things sooner rather than later. I think Eric Voskuil might actually disagree on this, saying that the fact that time preference is positive is also deduced, but Mises and I believe even Hoppe still take it as a axiom.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah, I think that's in human action, if I remember it correctly.
In human action, for sure.
Yeah,
and you know, this is again where Voskuil's argument is that time preference is, as the name says, a preference, and the axiom of subjective preferences are still subjective, and making a statement that, for example, a higher time preference is worse than a lower time preference is very much not praxeological. That's a psychological claim.
But that's not what we're claiming. We're claiming that if you're prone to making more short-term decisions, then you might see that we're speculating, of course, but we're speculating about the potential attacker not knowing or ignoring the long-term consequences of a violent action and choosing to do it anyway because of a higher time preference.
Mm-hmm. Hoppe he got kicked out of university because a bunch of social justice warriors got very angry at a statement that he made that gay people have a higher time preference than straight people because gay people cannot reproduce, right, biologically, and therefore they don't have children, and therefore they don't think into the future as much as heterosexual people who actually reproduce, biologically speaking, have. So a bunch of people got pissed off about that statement, but if you look at it neutrally, that's a pretty good argument, actually.
I would say that it's highly subjective. I mean, you can I mean, children, there's nothing concrete about having children giving you a lower time preference. It certainly gave me a lower time preference, but that doesn't mean that will happen to everyone. And well, if then you can also argue from a evolutionary biology perspective and say that if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have survived very long. But that doesn't necessarily make the gay person have a higher time preference, because you can still think generationally and have some sort of maybe you have siblings that have offspring that you choose to devote your life to. I mean, it's not a given. I would say, and I would call it bad praxeology even.
It's a value judgment to some extent.
Yeah, exactly. It's a value judgment.
And Mises was very careful with that. When, as you mentioned, he was very much interested in epistemology, and he was very clear of economics being wertfrei, value-free.
Yeah,
meaning that we make objective statements here, and they do not include the reasons for valuation, so to say.
No, exactly. It doesn't say why you prefer the steak. It just notices that you prefer the steak to the two apples.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's probably why Mises was also not an anarchist, so to say. He was still a statist in some aspects, but he did explain the consequences of statism versus anarchism very well. But he was very different to the later more American Austrian economists like Rothbard and ultimately Hoppe.
Yeah. Yeah, he still believed in some sort of state, and especially Hoppe sees Rothbard as well sees all state activity as a violation of property rights and criminal.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I'm reading a Hoppe book at the moment called Theory on Socialism and on Capitalism and Socialism.
That's such a great book too.
A great book too. Very, very good, and it explains social democracy so well, like the light version of the bad stuff, and it was just like reading a history book about Sweden before it actually happened in Sweden, but it's exactly what has happened in Sweden. He lays it out perfectly before it happened, and how incompetence will over time, more and more incompetence will spread throughout these institutions, and because people can make money and make a living by doing unproductive things that aren't good for anyone.
So it's lacking the creative destruction. One of the most beautiful things about the free market system is that when you fail, you carry the consequences, and you can no longer fail in the future. Because you're poor, and all of a sudden you're no longer in control of the resources because you made entrepreneurial mistakes. There's real consequences to that. And yes, that's scary, and many people are not up for that challenge. But that's just life, because we have a limited amount of resources. If you mess up, then they're gone forever, and there's no way to getting them back. The creative destruction of, after a mistake, the resources being reallocated to someone else who presumably still had enough capital to bail you out and to buy out your resources. That just means the things are now in better hands, or at least in different hands. And that person did not fail yet. Might still fail in the future. And when that new entrepreneur fails, the capital moves on to the next guy.
Yeah, and a clever entrepreneur makes sure that he can fail, but he can get wrecked, but doesn't necessarily have to be ruined. He can lose a part of or a certain aspect of his investment, but doesn't necessarily have to lose it all.
And also that even with zero external capital, you still have your body, and you still have your mind, and you still have the entrepreneurial spark and that genius of finding out the problems of other people and finding efficient and good strategies to alleviate them. And that creative genius is useful even if you're poor, and it can get you out of a state of poverty.
there are numerous examples of spread all throughout history everywhere of people doing exactly that.
Yeah, it's the human condition, you know, that drive to solve problems, and that creative genius of envisioning ever more and more effective ways of doing so. It is absolutely beautiful, and it is something to love about humankind, and to cherish, and to build systems that support this, and that help entrepreneurs to flourish. That is absolutely, and without a shadow of a doubt, the way out of poverty and into prosperity. And it is something that is achievable for everyone. As long as you're a human actor, you have that capacity.
Yeah. If you have inflationary money, like if you have fiat currency in the system, that will incentivize people to consume rather than spend, because prices in such a system go up over time. And the more inflation you have, the faster this process is. So in countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, where the currency is hyperinflating, people tend to try to spend their money as soon as possible. And what that means is that society, that type of society, will prioritize consumer goods and producing a lot of them over time. So more and more resources will get allocated, or I would say misallocated, into shit we don't need. And the way I see it, this is the main problem of humanity. Like all other problems stem from this underlying problem, especially environmental problems, which I view as they cannot be solved unless this very basic problem of overconsumption is solved first. Bitcoin is the other way around, and the more I think about it, the more I see it as one divided by the current system. So it's the literal inverse of what's going on right now. In the long run, it's deflationary, and you could say that it's even deflationary now because you can predict the coming deflation in it. And I've also come to the conclusion that there can only be one deflationary currency, because more than one of them would make them inflationary. So there can only be one in the end. And we talked about this in Riga, about how when more and more people realize how precious this resource is and how little they want to lose their bitcoins, like how precious they become to people once they realize how immensely valuable they may become, and how precious they really are. That's one of the later talks we had. We came up with the idea of us, being nice to one another. It's just Gresham's law playing out on a Bitcoin standard. And I know you've been thinking about that at least a bit since, and maybe you come to some other conclusion, or what do you think about that in hindsight? Let's just explain to the audience what Gresham's law is first, because I skipped that. Sorry about that, Max. But
go ahead, define it.
Well, Gresham's law it states that good money drives up bad money. So that in a system where you have a crappy currency and a better currency, people will tend to use the crappy currency first and hoard the better currency. So in a country like Venezuela, people will more voluntarily give up their bolivars for stuff than they would give up their US dollars if they had US dollars and bolivars. And this is also true for dollars and gold. People don't very voluntarily sell their gold bar. They try to get rid of their dollars first. And the discussion we had in Riga, we came to the conclusion that you would rather give up just about anything before you give up your Bitcoin stack if you're a hodler of last resort. So even giving up your reputational capital and giving your time and effort to other people is just Gresham's law playing out on Bitcoin. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Gresham's law is quite an old one. I think it was like 1700s or something like this. And it was about a specific specific case of market intervention. And maybe a more precise way of framing it is that artificially overvalued money drives out artificially undervalued money. So let's say, like in the actual case back then, you had a gold coin, and the government mints this coin and says that in here is 1 ounce of gold. And well, there's actually 1 ounce of gold inside of it. But now someone starts chipping away the edges, coin clipping. The imprint still says it's 1 ounce of gold, but in fact it's like 0.8 ounces of gold. Now in a voluntary free market system, that 0.8 ounces of gold would trade at 0.8 ounces of gold. However, with the government manipulation, they can have an artificial price system that if a coin has the imprint of the government, it always has to trade at the imprinted value. So it has to trade for 1 ounce of gold, even though it's in fact 0.8 ounces of gold. And that is now an artificial overvaluation. The actual 0.8 ounces of gold have to trade for 1 ounce of gold worth of things, right? So now you want to buy something, and the merchant says, okay, it's 1 ounce of gold, and you have 2 coins in your hands. A coin that is full, freshly minted, with actually 1 ounce of gold inside of it, versus the clipped coin with 0.8 ounces of gold. Now, assuming that you can use the force of the government to give that 0.8 ounce gold coin to the merchant, and he is now forced to give you the pizza for 1 ounce of gold or whatever, then obviously you would give that 0.8 ounce coin and hold the 1 ounce coin. And that is the artificially overvalued money, the 0.8 coin, that has to be accepted at face value of 1 ounce. So you will hoard and not spend the full new and undervalued, artificially undervalued coin for the overvalued one. And that is the actual phenomena. But interestingly, that the Gresham's law only applies if there is state manipulation and artificial changes of the valuation of the money that is used in and of itself. And presumably in a hyper-Bitcoinized world, such coercion is no longer present. And therefore, Gresham's law in and of itself, as it was defined back then, would no longer apply. Now, that's just the background on what Gresham actually meant with these statements. I know that you mean something different.
Yeah, but a point on that: if we exclude money altogether from this equation and try to do the same, apply the same logic to barter, if you have too many apples and they will rot tomorrow, you will want to trade away your apples before you trade away your car or your gold bar, right? So that's a type of Gresham. I view that as Gresham's law in a sense as well. Or is that called something else? Well, it's the law of diminishing marginal utility, but that's basically what Gresham's law is: the diminishing return from an extra unit of that thing. Isn't that applicable to money too, in the same sense? And isn't that just what Gresham's law is?
So there is a free market alternative to Gresham's law, and that is Thiel's law, which basically states that if the merchant is not under duress, not under coercion, he will reject your offer of the 0.8 ounce gold coin. He will insist on the 1 ounce gold coin, right? And so this means that in a free market system, good money drives out bad money. Merchants will insist in getting paid in the high quality and good money, and they will not give you their products or services if you dare to pay them in shit, right?
Yes, and this is why I believe that hyper-Bitcoinization doesn't start until everyone starts accepting nothing but Bitcoin for their goods and services. When people start, when Thiel's law starts taking over after Gresham's law has, killed the dollar.
Exactly, right? So here we have this conundrum. Merchants in a voluntary system will always prefer to get paid in magical cyberspace money because it's magical cyberspace money. Everyone wants to get it. However, the customers don't want to give up their magical cyberspace money, right? Because it's magical cyberspace money. You don't want to give it away. You want to hoard as much as fucking possible. So there's a big mismatch, but you know what solves that mismatch? The price. You know, at some point the merchant is willing to accept willing to at some point the merchant is going to give away his stuff, and at some point at some price the customer is willing to pay for it. And in a free market system, supply and demand will meet, and there will be a price established.
Exactly. Like, you will get the velocity of money that Keynesians love to talk about so much from necessity, which is the natural state of things. So there's that. But on to the point of so say, at least during this transition period from non hyper Bitcoinized world into a hyper Bitcoinized world, the way I see it, like, since it's not only the Gresham's law thing, or whatever you may call it, that is playing out in the background, but it's also we want each other to succeed. Well, because we're friends for sure, but also because we're Bitcoiners, and we want to help other Bitcoiners succeed, because if other Bitcoiners succeed, we help Bitcoin succeed. This is another thing I've been thinking about, that Pascal's wager, which I've been an opponent of for a long time, actually works on if you view Bitcoin as God, because if I act as if Bitcoin exists, I actually increase its chances of success, because the more people that believe in this thing, for lack of a better word, that will eventually reflect itself in a higher price or a higher valuation of Bitcoin, which in turn will make every Bitcoiner more wealthy and more powerful and more able to influence political decisions and, write better code and so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, money is the most liquid medium of exchange. So the more merchants demand to get paid in a certain money, literally the higher its value. And it's a network effect, right? So with every merchant entering the system of exclusively getting paid in Bitcoin and rejecting to get paid in shitcoins like fiat money, then we have an exponential increase of the value, or like the number of connections possible inside the Bitcoin network, while simultaneously having an exponential decrease of the value of the shitcoin networks, or the amount of connections being made in the shitcoin system. So yes, that is definitely a strong thing. And it's not just that we're going to pump each other's bags. It's also that the more people have a good money, the more they can, the more they're able to work on the things that they want to work on. The wealthier they will be, the more capital that they have, and the more they can specialize on whatever service that they provide. So it just means the more humans we have that are productive, the more division of labor we can enjoy, and the more specialized their services will be, and the more problems we can solve. So more humans is by default a good thing, and more Bitcoin humans by default is a good thing, because we have an infinite amount of problems, and we need more people to fix them. And these people need to be better equipped in order to fix them. And how are you going to get better equipped? By having strong property rights, especially by having strong property rights into the monetary system, because that then enables, not just the investment opportunities, but also the pricing mechanisms that we discussed earlier, which are essential in the non-wasteful allocation of resources.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And we, having traveled a lot, as I know you have too, we notice the absurdity of all of these borders and bureaucratic papers that hinder people from and steal their time and hinder them from interacting with one another. So what are your thoughts on like the risks to going into the future? What are some of the risks for the European Union to begin with, and for the world as a whole? I guess we're going to see more clown world shit before before this thing plays out, I try to be an optimist. I try to choose to be an optimist because I see just the fact that we can have this video call by the click of a button, and we have Bitcoin, and we have all sorts of other tools. I mean, all you need to do to connect to absolutely anyone in the world can be done instantly, and it's not that hard to get to talk to a famous person, for instance, or someone, a very busy person, or whatever. I mean, all of these things are so much more so easier than they used to be, which enables people to cooperate on a whole different level. So I see that happening simultaneously as you see this decadent collapse of the fiat monetary system, where everything has to be more and more based on credit and based on stupid consumerist bullshit that's going on everywhere. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the big problem of the fiat monetary system is obviously the inflation, and the fact that this inflation leads to malinvestment and overconsumption. So because people perceive that they are wealthy, they invest in additional resources or in additional production stages. However, with each additional investment, the quality of the investment decreases, right? Because you've already invested in the best investment opportunity with the last unit of money. So the next unit of money obviously has to go into the marginally worse one. So this means we will invest our resources into ever worse and worse products, while simultaneously people are over-consuming. So because price levels tend to increase in the future, you will need to get rid of your money as soon as possible to buy anything, because in the future, anything or everything will be more expensive. So there's like, this is an attack on two fronts. For one, people start new investment projects that are much longer and than they otherwise would have been, even to that extent that without the inflation, these projects would never have been started in the first place. So we allocate resources and capital into longer production stages for things that we otherwise wouldn't even have touched at all, while simultaneously we keep on consuming resources that we otherwise would not have consumed. So ultimately, that is a massive resource consumption or misallocation of resources. And the sad thing is, all of this happens during the boom period where everyone is feeling rich, which we're arguably still in the boom period induced by the fiat system. And it's been going on for at least 100 years. The last 10, 20 years were pretty insane in terms of money printing. Arguably, the fiat scam has been going on for thousands of years. So there was a lot of malinvestment and overconsumption in the past, and there is no way to make that go away. Those are mistakes that happened in the past, and the consequences of those mistakes are still to come. That is the bust. That's when we realize that we've wasted resources on long production stages so much that we cannot even finish shorter level production stages of things that are actually really important. You know, we've used all the steel and concrete to build yet another ugly fiat house, while actually we now no longer have the resources that are needed to finish building the hospital, for example. So not just will the ugly fiat houses not be completed, even the very important infrastructure projects will not be completed either, because of a lack of resources, because we've applied it into long production stages and consumed it on the other side as well. And, well, there's no way to get around this. However, Bitcoin comes into play to speed up the bust. So because Bitcoin is here, the fiat economy will collapse much sooner than it otherwise would have. Because all of a sudden, Bitcoin introduces the real opportunity cost of saving money for the long term. That opportunity cost being very unprofitable in the fiat system. In Bitcoin, it's a very profitable thing to save your money. Well, because the money is more valuable in the future. So Bitcoin makes individuals much more frugal. Bitcoiners invest their money into way shorter projects, if they even invest their money at all. Most Bitcoiners have zero investments. You know, they just hoard their money and they're not giving it to anyone, including to any entrepreneur to go on and be productive. which means
well, you can, some of them invest a small part just for their own amusement's sake, and to see if it works.
Definitely, right? Your time preference cannot be negative. You always have to consume, and therefore you always have to produce in order to get the things that you want to consume. But it is way lower than it otherwise would have been. And this means that every Bitcoiner that starts stacking sats and that actually holds them is an active part in reallocating those resources away from the fiat-induced schemes into nothing, right? Again, Bitcoiners don't invest their money when they hold it. Holding money is the literal opposite of investing money. You're telling every entrepreneur who's asking you for money that he's not good enough, that his projects are not important enough, that not investing is better than investing. And this just means we will reduce our resource consumption substantially. With every sat that you hold, you reduce the amount of resources allocated today so that we have more resources available in the future. And that is something that we very, very, very much need. We need to stop the wasteful allocation of resources that are induced by the fiat system. And through Bitcoin, the bust, meaning will come much sooner. And the bust is when we realize that we don't have enough resources available today to finish these projects. So the entrepreneurs that started these projects and that own them will go bankrupt. Meaning that they have to sell them to someone else, and that someone else then will take away those resources from those production stages that were fiat induced and try to apply them to something else. Now, the big problem, of course, is that once we start transforming general resources, for example, a block of steel, it could be anything, into more specific production goods, let's say an engine or something, it's very difficult to undo that transformation, to turn that engine into a piece of just steel again, or to break down a house and get out the concrete and the steel and the wirings and whatnot that made it up. However, we can do that thanks to the fiat entrepreneurs going bust much sooner. So Bitcoin is a way for the bust to happen much sooner, and for those people who are smart enough to stop investing into the fiat scams, to profit greatly at the expense of those fiat entrepreneurs that have made such tremendous misallocations.
Yeah, this reminds me of the discussion you and I had a couple of months back about the difference between hodling and saving. Because as you say, holding on to money is a deliberate action. According to Praxeology, it's a delayed gratification. That is just that. That is saving. I would, to make it easy for the listeners here, I would call it saving and hodling, to make the distinction between the two. And saving is something you do in order to you do that with a clear intention of using that money at some point in the future. I argue, however, that might not be the case with hodling, because you can hodl. Hodling can be a human action, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, because inanimate objects can hodl Bitcoin. I mean, dead people can hodl Bitcoin. The example I love is, imagine that Hal Finney memorized a Bitcoin private key before he died and cryo froze his head, and we find a way to resurrect him in 4,000 years, and he comes back and he can unlock those Bitcoin and become immensely rich in his new body. So in your mind, have you given this more thought? Is there a difference between the action of saving and the action of hodling?
Yes, Eric Voskibul is again very great at this point, that saving money is a consumption because it comes at the opportunity cost of the market rate of return. So instead of saving your money, you could have given it to an entrepreneur, either via debt or equity, so that he goes and is productive and gives you more money in the future. And on top of that, if you want to save your money, you have a demurrage cost. There's a cost of using money. You know, in the classical sense, you need, if you have gold coins, you need to have a physical box, a safe deposit box, to put the gold coins in, and you need to hire a bodyguard to stand in front of the box with a gun. And then if you want to move the gold to somewhere else, you need to, well, apply a lot of actual energy and power to move that weight across space. So all of these things are quite costly. And even in the Bitcoin realm, there is a cost of receiving and holding and spending money. Specifically, the on-chain transaction cost. You need to convince a miner to include your transaction into a Bitcoin block. And you need to have the computer to generate or to verify how much money you have and to generate the signature that actually spends that money. So there's definitely a cost of holding Bitcoin. And simultaneously, there are very much profitable entrepreneurs in the Bitcoin space. So that means that holding money or saving money is a consumption, right? And it decreases your capital over time. You know, you get less and less Bitcoin because you need to buy your hardware wallet and things like this. And then, you know, to the point of dead people being able to hodl. Well, dead people aren't human anymore. Like, humans are defined as being alive.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That hodling can be a human action, but it can also, it doesn't necessarily have to be a human action. Saving is something that only humans can do, but hodling is something else completely. That's my argument.
So saving then I guess has the intent of spending in the future, and that people no longer have the intent of spending things in the future.
No,
they don't.
Hodling can have that intent, but doesn't necessarily have. I mean, even as you can time lock your Bitcoin for 5 generations ahead. Then you have an intent of your grandchildren spending them, but it's not really your intent of spending them yourself at some point in the future.
But you would still spend your
that is a human action. I grant you that. But yeah. Where were we? You said something here. I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, about the opportunity cost for hodling Bitcoin as compared to gold. I mean, the big difference is that the cost of storing and hodling 0.01 Bitcoin is exactly the same as the cost of hodling and storing 1,000 Bitcoins. Because the size does not matter for the costs involved. Of course, there's what matters is satoshis per byte when you spend them. But if you choose to spend them on a Sunday and you you know your stuff around that and how to circumvent the largest costs, those costs can be you mean what Greg Foss would call a rounding error. I mean, they would be so infinitely small. Say if you had 100,000 Bitcoins, storing and then subsequently spending that at some point can be insanely cheap in comparison to anything else with that kind of value attached to it. And that type of difference in that the amount doesn't really affect the cost of the storage. How does that play into like the dynamics of this thing?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because storing and moving an ounce of gold versus 10 kilos of gold is very, very different. So yeah, that is quite unique in how Bitcoin works. And there are other ways to transferring possession of Bitcoin that do not involve a blockchain transaction where you have to bribe miners to get confirmed. The Lightning Network is a great example.
Yeah, just an open dime.
Open dime is an even better
12
example.
magic words.
Yeah,
and then blowing your head off, so to ensure that you actually moved and didn't just copy the words.
Exactly. Well, state chains, by the way, are an interesting way to use a private key transfer to move coins, or like the possession of coins to other people by actually transferring a private key. However, that only works while trusting a third party with co-signing transactions. But in any case, there's many different ways of transferring Bitcoin. Yet, and here again, we just need to get smarter about using the system. And we definitely will be. So I expect the cost of moving Bitcoin will change at the very least, and it will get cheaper in some ways, and it will get more expensive in others. Like opening a Lightning channel will probably get incredibly expensive just because of the cost of making a blockchain transaction. But then updating a payment channel will be quite cheap. Versus then routing a payment through the Lightning network via updating multiple payment channels is again something where all of a sudden the cost depends on the amount of Satoshis that you transfer. So these are all different types of demurrage costs in different payment systems of Satoshis that are very difficult to predict in the future. If you would have asked people 10 years ago about the future cost of Bitcoin payments, they would have probably estimated a much larger number than it actually is right now. Because, well, the cost of verifying payments has reduced drastically with things like SegWit, while technologies like the Lightning Network and payment channels or things like OpenDime are very new and in a way that people 10 years ago would not certainly not have been able to imagine. So yeah, the ingenuity and the creativity of humans will continue to baffle us, and so it's very hard to make predictions about the demurrage cost of holding money in the Bitcoin system.
Yeah, but even now that cost is very low in comparison to hodling or storing anything else really. If you're if you have a lot of crap furniture and plastic toys and whatnot, some people are hoarders and they get a storage space for all their crap, and they have a cost attached to that. I mean, Bitcoins are vastly different compared to physical goods, just because of this very notion of moving ownership or possession into the actual intellectual realm. This is an actual intellectual property.
Yeah, the first reasonable intellectual property claims are Bitcoin UTXOs.
Yeah, intellectual property is an interesting subject too. I know we both hate intellectual property or the concept of it, except for the only actual intellectual property, which would be Bitcoin.
Yeah, which arguably isn't even arguably Bitcoin isn't property again, right? There's so property is a legal concept of and a social concept of do other people agree that you have a certain claim on resources, and do they acknowledge these claims? Bitcoin is a way of just using speech which are non-scarce and where there cannot be a reasonable claim of owning a certain set of words or a certain set of code or a certain set of ideas. And the beautiful thing is Bitcoin enables ownership without relying on enforcing exclusivity of information by simply using very large numbers. Like, you don't own your private key. It's just a set of 12 words after all, and you don't own these words, and you can't prevent other people from using these words. However, you can just pick a really large number randomly, and you don't need to enforce others to not think about this number or to not know about this number. You just use cryptography as a way of randomly picking such a large random number that if someone else were to try to randomly pick a number that large, he would most certainly not come up with the same number that you came up with. So that's the beauty of cryptography and private keys. We're just, because we have computers that can reason or compute such tremendously large values, like actual numerical values, I mean, which our brain is not capable of, it becomes impossible for someone else to know the same number that you know. and all of a sudden you have not exclusive possession, or like not an exclusive right to possess, but you have the exclusive knowledge of something that is not possible for someone else to know as well, unless you tell them.
So it's a secret isn't property then? You couldn't call a secret someone's property.
No, because the secret is just information, right? And however, you have the power to reveal that information to someone else, and unless you choose to reveal it to someone, it is impossible for that person to guess it. Especially in the sense of private keys.
But here we could go deeper and say that at its core, everything is information, right? The fundamental particles that make up the universe, there's no way of knowing if they contain anything but information, I guess. But that's taking it a tad too far, I guess, for this discussion anyway. We'll need a couple of ponchos first. Where to go next with this? Luke, do you have a question for us or for Max?
Hey guys, hey Max. Yeah, this has been great. I've just been letting you roll. Awesome to be a fly on the wall for this. But maybe to take it back a little bit more towards the beginning of the discussion, one thing that I am interested in is how this praxeology stuff is impactful to the daily lives of Bitcoiners and to yourself. Has the praxeology, thinking about this stuff, has it helped you in your life and how you orient yourself in the world?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because without understanding praxeology, I would not be a Bitcoiner at all. And because of getting to really think about the consequences of human action, you really get to understand the value of voluntary association and consensual exchange. And you get to understand the reasons of why money exists, and the reasons of why it is so useful, and about the qualitative differences between money, and about why shitty money is really, really, really bad. And with shitty money, I mean money that you are forced to use, and specifically money that that you're not allowed to produce yourself, where someone else can produce the money very cheaply, but and sell it to you at an artificially high price, but you're not allowed to produce that money at all. Right? If you would start printing US dollars, I'm pretty sure you're going to get someone knocking on your door quite soon. But the genius thing is, like with Bitcoin, you're the one that can print the money software that defines the monetary rules and that verifies the monetary rules on a set of transactions, and that enforces the declaration of invalidity to transactions that do not adhere to your set of rules. With Bitcoin, I wouldn't be a Bitcoiner for sure. So I wouldn't be stacking sats hard. And that means I wouldn't have, as much capital available, right? Especially capital that cannot be stolen from me. And that alone is already worth it very much to, in order to get a good conviction of that Bitcoin is useful, you need to understand economic reasoning. But it's not just about the money. I don't think I would be as human loving without the understanding of praxeology. Like it's very easy to become nihilistic and to hate humans and to see us just as a cancer on this planet, and something, a disease that should be extinguished. Like that is a very easy trap to fall into, and it's a sad mindset to be in. To think that your own existence is something that were better if it were not there. That's sad, to be honest. And praxeology really gave me an understanding that humans are beautiful creatures, that we're a marvel to behold, and that our existence is something to flourish and something to be extremely proud of, about how we are and what we can achieve. And I think just this different mindset makes you a better person, a kinder person, and one that's also more useful. Like it's nice to understand what it means to solve someone else's problems, or what it means to be an entrepreneur, which is just to solve someone else's problems. It's a lot of clarity in the way of thinking, and it helps you in so many ways. I mean, it's really baffling. Plus, it's just super fun to think about. I mean, these are so difficult, difficult mental challenges. You know, like, what are the consequences of minimum wage? You know, what are the consequences of inflation, of taxation, of all these other things? Or what are the consequences of good money? It's super interesting to think about, and it's just a nice way of spending time. So I enjoy researching and thinking about economics tremendously.
I totally agree with this, and I can relate to all of it. So what he said, all of it, it's just the appreciation for other people. That's key, because it's, as you say, it's very easy to become a cynic because there's so much, but because you see the bad stuff before you see the good stuff. It's easy to complain because it's easy to see what's wrong with the systems we live in and why resources get misallocated. But then again, I'm sitting in front of a computer saying this, and there are little, you know, the screen is working. That in itself is a complete miracle. So yeah, grateful for being alive, especially at this point in time, but because it truly feels like we're living through something really special here.
Yeah, for sure.
So how would you encourage people listening to start to incorporate some of these ideas to maybe make some of these changes that you see as positive for yourself?
Well, there's only one hard rule, and that's don't steal. And it's a bloody difficult rule, though. It's like, it's tempting to steal. And the worst thing about the fiat scam is that it tricks you into stealing, and you might not even know about it. But demanding to get paid in an inflationary fiat currency is stealing. Every time you get paid in US dollars, you're stealing from billions of people.
And your children, including your children.
Including your, like, that's not even just, it's trillions of people. It's not just the people who are alive today. It's all the people that want to get paid in that money, even in the future. So it's a horrendous crime to get paid in fiat and to want that and to hold it. So no, like, it's not just about not, you know, pickpocketing a bubble gum in the store. Like, yeah, that's already bad as well. But theft, like, it's so sad of how humans got tricked into stealing, and of thinking that the stealing is not just a good thing, but that it's a requirement, that's a necessity for life. It's really sad, and also not just about actively stealing yourself, but encouraging or acknowledging that the theft of others is a good thing as well. You know, like supporting governments, like, that is fundamentally evil. Like, you should not be in support of governments. That is a bad thing to do. And it takes a lot of conviction of like realizing that and then really applying it into your life. It's not at all easy. It's a big adventure. And like the second rule that I would follow is mind your own business. Like, if it's none of your business, just stay out of it. If it's other people's property, let them do their stuff. Your opinions don't matter if it's someone else's property, which of course is also very difficult, because if you see someone else doing something that you don't like, of course you're angry and you want to yell at him and convince him of doing something else, but it's just fundamentally none of your business. And I guess these two rules, don't steal and mind your own business, just trying to apply that is, I guess, the adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah, well said. I have two rules for my kids. Rule number 1 is shut the fuck up, and rule number 2 is don't be retarded. And so that's my tip for raising kids. But arguably, I should use your rules instead and teach them those.
Well, the shut the fuck up is pretty much the same thing as mind your own business. And I don't know.
Don't be retarded. Don't steal baked into it.
Exactly. That's the thing, right? Stealing is actually really retarded. Like on many levels, it's just super stupid. People get tricked into it, I think. And
yeah, when you see what political debates are about and the intellectual level of these people, it's truly depressing to watch, and it's very easy to see why people choose to become cynics and why they sometimes do atrocious things to themselves and to others because they become cynics.
Yeah.
Because it's so dark. Seeing that the people on top and the people with the most resources and with the most power are retarded, for lack of a better word. But they truly are, because they don't even see their own flaws. Not even they haven't even scratched the surface of their own flaws and how oxymoronic the things they say are. Because if socialists understood economics, there wouldn't be any socialists. That's just the fact.
And even the most so-called conservative politicians, whatever the ones that are supposedly exactly, and the point I'm going to make is all of these politicians now who are scrambling to put in inflation relief by sending money to everyone, and the whole thing is I'm just staring at this, saying, well, what do you think was the problem in the first place, guys?
Yeah, it's beyond mind-blowing that so few react to this, like that they don't see it. It's such to us Bitcoiners especially, it's so obvious that won't only not work, but that it will worsen the problem. Like,
but like you come to these realizations because you had a huge paradigm shift. It's like from a heliocentric, like moving to a heliocentric worldview that once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
No,
but before you see it, it's just impossible to realize that. And like probably all of us had like authoritarian socialist beliefs in the past before realizing at some point, the fundamental axioms or the fundamental logic of humans and freedom. And before that point, it's like not impossible, but very difficult to get over these views and these mindsets.
Yeah, and we all had those tendencies at some point. I don't think I know anyone that was born a hardcore libertarian that was completely anti-state. That is something you grow into over time, even though you could have had the tendency all of your life, but very few, at least, even, I mean, very few even know what libertarianism is and what it implies and why it is the way it is. They just think that we're evil capitalists that want to steal their resources, when the opposite is true.
Yeah, young people are easily manipulated, and I think it took me a while to understand that. But then you see New Zealand thinking of putting their voting age down to 16, and this is just a recipe for them to have the most left-wing government in the world forever. Until the system collapses on itself and no one wants to live in New Zealand anymore.
They tried to do that in Sweden, but then they realized that all the kids are voting for the Sweden Democrats, the nationalists. So then the left-wingers took that suggestion back again because it wasn't, good for them. So I think Titus Gabriel said it very well at the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference, that there is only one human right, and it's the right to be left alone. So if you have that as a starting point for your ethics and how you think about the world, then everything starts making sense. That it's a very basic thing, because all the other positive human rights, they are by necessity, they need to infringe on someone else's right to be left alone. Anything tax funded must be preceded by theft and coercion somewhere. So a state cannot acquire resources in any other way and by any other means than taking it away involuntarily from their populations. There was a voluntary tax fund in Norway for a short while, but they didn't manage to raise any money. Like, you can pay extra tax if you want. You think anyone did? Of course not, because people do not want to pay taxes. No one.
Well,
does.
they certainly don't want to pay more taxes when you're already paying 40%.
No, exactly, and they all want other people to pay more, but never themselves. And it's the same thing with everything. You want different rules. Most people want different rules to apply to different people, and that's the beauty of praxeology also, because these are truths that are universal, and they do not care about your race or creed or sex or whatever, religion, or because they cannot. They apply to all human beings, like all ethics, all good ethics should. And the only way to have something apply to all human beings is to not have is to have strong property rights. So, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It lays a foundation for a set of rules that cannot apply differently to different groups of people. It's impossible. The same rules apply to everyone, and it's completely voluntary. And yeah, and
this might be like the one of the many genius consequences of Bitcoin is that it confronts people with a universal ethic all of a sudden, like a set of monetary rules that just apply, full stop, regardless where, regardless to whom. And that opens your eyes. It like shows you what's possible. And well, then I guess you start thinking about where is a similar approach real and possible in other areas. And I think that's why so many people get drawn to anarchist principles and to praxeological reasoning. Because as Knut says, this is just how it is. If you're a human actor who can argue, those are the consequences, and there's no way around it. And since you can't argue yourself out of the fact that you can argue, well, they apply, full stop, regardless where you are, regardless who you are, and regardless when you are. They just are.
That's a great point. And I think the reason to think about these ideas as I'm putting it together, because what I like to find when I'm thinking about things is, one, how can I apply this to make my life better? But also, what is the reason why thinking about this is good? Why is it a good thing to do for this? Because I want to evangelize that idea. Think about these things and grow your freedom footprint, to try and use our show's tagline. But the real thing I see here is that it's a tool for people to, Bitcoiners, but people in general, to look at this and understand the world better, and then take it to a level of making practical decisions that are actually in line with reality, instead of based on this distorted system that has been shoved down our collective consciousnesses, right? And so I hope that if someone is listening to this conversation and just getting into praxeology, that this can be a starting point to building this understanding, which I think will continue to dig deeper down the rabbit hole and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it just stems from this will to, or wish to understand reality better, and praxeology is definitely a shortcut to that, because it removes a lot of unnecessary hurdles that you thought you knew how the world worked, but you can very easily see where your thinking was flawed, and you become a better thinker by deep diving into this. So I can recommend it to absolutely everyone in the universe, because it will make life on Earth easier for everyone if more people dive into this, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just something to clarity and to really understanding something and to be able to get to the point. It like, it just makes click and you see something obvious, and from there on out, things start just starting to make sense. And that's a nice mode to be in, to not be confused, but to know what's going on. That's a luxury.
Yeah, and both of the two of you, Max and Knut, you're both also testaments to the things that can come out the other end when you're thinking in this mindset. Knut, you've got your books which have inspired so many people, and Max, we haven't even talked about all the projects that you're involved in, and maybe we'll bring you back on another time to talk a little more about that sort of thing. But it's amazing to me and fantastic that these conversations on the base layer can happen, and this is the stuff that I hope is inspiring, because hearing the philosophy and the thinking about it, I think seeing the results is also one reason to explore these things, because if the two of you are producing such great things, then maybe someone else who is starting to think about this stuff can also learn to do something and see the world in a more clear way, to find out how they can contribute to the world, to Bitcoin, to whatever. So that's my hope here.
Yeah, action speaks louder than words.
Yeah. Sure. And that's like the best feedback that I get is when people say, hey, like, because of the reasoning that I laid out, or the information that I shared, they started to contribute to some free software projects, or they started to evangelize Bitcoin. They stopped getting paid in fiat. All of these things that are also, it's crazy. That humans figured out a way to get so damn efficient with sharing information, and it's so impactful. It's so real. Like the consequences of the words that we speak, not just here, but also with the code that we run, they're real. Like, this is changing everything, and it's just goosebumps every time you realize about the immense power and the immense impact that random dudes like you and me can have on this world. Like, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it truly is. I vividly remember the first time I got goosebumps from an interaction with another Bitcoiner, and it was a guy from Venezuela who managed to flee the country into Colombia after having read my book, and that just him and his family. So my writings contributed to an actual person fleeing from a tyrannical government into another. I get goosebumps talking about it. That thing could actually, never in my wildest dreams would I have believed something like that could ever happen to me. Like, but the things we do matter. They echo, and there are rings on the water and butterfly effects of everything everywhere, and it's just so, and that's why I devoted my life to just conversations about this thing, and putting my thoughts on paper about this thing, because I can't think of anything more rewarding to do with my time at this point in history. Of course not.
Obvious.
It's so obvious. Yeah. Look, hello. Wake the fuck up. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Bitcoin is insane. Once you get it, you just can't stop but shout from the mountaintops about this magical thing. Seriously, it's like the Philosopher's Stone, and the way that it changes people is the most crazy thing out of all. Like, the fact that it works technologically, that's cool and all, but the way that it changes who you are and how you act and how you feel and how you think and how you love it's unspeakable.
Yeah, this is exactly what my talks turned into over time this fall. That Bitcoin's killer app is you and me. Bitcoin is not a killer app for us. We are its killer app because of the way it changes how we interact with one another. Because changing the rules of human interaction is changing absolutely everything fundamentally, and how we operate, and how like you say, theft is retarded and it's hard to not steal. I mean, just the fact that you came to those conclusions via this thing, it's so profound. And if more people, the more people that can come to those realizations, the better off we are, of course. Like, yeah, it's like I said, it's so bleeding obvious that this is the thing.
Yeah, and it's participatory knowledge. Like, once you fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you feel how it changes you. Like, you actually experience that you've become a better human being with interacting through this. And if it's true for me, then it's true for others too, right? And like, what happens then if this technology impacts billions of people, like not just now, but for a prolonged period of time? And what does it do to the next generation who are born and who grow up in a world where this magic exists and is around them? And like, what happens after 7 generations of this?
Yeah,
that's fucking no, but like, holy shit.
Yeah. Those things are. It's so. Yeah, Luke, do you feel it? Do you feel it? Do you feel Bitcoin making you a better person right now?
Right now, absolutely, right now, definitely.
The tingly feeling in your kneecaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's sitting down too long and not Bitcoin, but anyway.
Yeah, I sit too much during the day anyway. But yeah, it's amazing, and I mean, I'm glad to have these conversations, and we're at the end of the time we booked. I have a feeling we could probably continue talking, but maybe now that we've hit such a metaphysical little spot, maybe now is the right time to close for the day. But Max, is there anything else you'd like to bring up, or anywhere you'd like to direct listeners towards who'd like to connect with you or find out more about what you're doing?
The really good conversations start 3 hours in, so this wasn't even the good part yet. But
no, which is why we have to make a sequel to this.
Yeah, but then we start from zero again. So.
Yeah. Okay, we will just have to have someone bug us at the next fucking VIP party.
Seriously, like I've been thinking about this. The Bitcoin tribe gatherings are so insane, man. The frequency there is magical, and why do we even have stages? Like, we really should just, do it Big Brother style and have cameras and microphones everywhere, and we just have like a horde of Bitcoiners sitting on the same
Bitcoiners love that.
Oh yeah, it would be great.
Love having cameras everywhere.
Yeah. But there's a magic of getting together, and really just focusing our joint minds and hearts on thinking and about these problems and solving them. Like, yeah, it's crazy, and we're just getting started. That's the it's the most crazy thing that, like, it's only been 13, 14 years, and we already see the first glimpse of the consequences of this. It's ineffable. Seriously, about what's to come. We are not prepared at fucking all. We're gonna be so wrecked because we're underestimating this so much. It's insane. It's like the long-term consequences of this are unfucking speakable.
Oh,
can't wait to see it. Can't wait to find out.
Yeah. This is too bad. That's a great note to stop on, but it is, Max, and thanks so much for coming on. And of course, you're welcome on anytime. If you feel like a conversation, hook us up, and we'll continue this. Otherwise, we'll harass you and get you back somehow before you become, a statue in each city on the globe. which will happen eventually, and it will be a beautiful statue with a unbuttoned shirt and a big beard and a kingly look. So looking forward to the bright orange future, and
thanks fellas for the invitation and the great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
We'll have to talk about wasabi next time, but we left that out this time, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. We laid the groundwork. But wasabi is to a lot of sense the culmination of all of those thoughts. Like I would not be working and contributing to wasabi if not for the study of praxeology and the understandings of the importance of individual property rights and individual privacy. Like those are conclusions, and wasabi is the cathedral that is being built based on those principles. And it's the fucking ride of my lifetime. So it's that's most important. Like, we just fanboyed like crazy about how important Bitcoin is. And for me, wasabi is the most important project in the Bitcoin space. And like with Bitcoin being that fucking crazy important, like it's a really high claim for me or like a high statement for me to be working and dedicating most all of my time on building wasabi. Like it's praxeological proof because I'm working on it. That's me being convinced that this is the most important thing that I could be doing right now with my time. And considering all the craziness that's going on, it's quite a high claim. So check out wasabiwallet.io. It's quite something. Could be a lot better. Will be a lot better. But what we have now is already magic, man. We solved the final problem of Bitcoin was privacy. That you were forced to reveal, or not forced, but you were tricked into revealing a lot of information about yourself. And wasabi is a way to, by default, reveal very little about yourself in terms of your financial actions. And now we have anonymous money. Full stop. That's like it's fixed now. We have the money. That's done. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks, Max. And so wasabiwallet.io, and then anywhere else, Twitter or anything like that?
Twitter is just Hillebrand Max. towardsliberty.com. There's all my contact details. There's also the book that I mentioned earlier where I'm horribly failing to actually write it. But that's about praxeology and on privacy. So eventually I'll sit down and hash out, like actually write all this stuff. Or I just get Knut to be my ghostwriter. That might be
Maybe we should do it together.
Yeah.
Maybe. My best tip for writing a book is don't decide beforehand what it's about. Because then you'll get writer's block all the way. You make the process boring by doing that. So it's the only way I know how to write a book. I know other authors do it differently, of course, but you have to be a very disciplined person in order to first figure out what it's about and then write it. To me, that would be homework, and I fucking hate homework. So there's that.
I think for me,
I just wing it.
Yeah. Just wing it. Yeah, for me, it's just I need to actually sit down and write. I have all this stuff in my head. It just needs to get put on paper. So eventually all the Bitcoiners are going to get locked up in the gulag anyhow, which, by the way, is going to be the best Bitcoin conference ever. And the prison guards are going to be so annoyed.
Best gulag ever.
At that point, at the very latest, I'm going to finally be wrong.
Yeah, then we're going to write a book. All right. Yeah. See you next time, Max. I hope to see you soon in reality as well. I will see you if not before that, in Prague in June, I believe. There's a conference. And I will see you in Miami, maybe.
Nope.
Probably not. Maybe on Madeira.
Cool. We'd love to come
Madeira.
Enjoy the good weather. Beautiful.
I'll tell you when I'm going, and I hope you do the same to me. So see you soon.
Thanks
Take
very
care.
much, Luke and Knut. See you around, fellas. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks again for joining us. This has been the Freedom Footprint Show. Thanks again, Max Hillebrand.